Meet the Wheelers, so brave and so true. A mystical journey is waiting for you. Dad Arthur can fix it, Mom Ellie can steer. With Max and with Lily, there's nothing to fear. Barley's our dog, a magic retriever. 3 wishes a day for the magic believer. I'm Elias, your guide to this grand library. Buckle up, friends. Let's make history.
Step closer, travelers, and mind the dust. Tonight I found a volume that hums with 1,000 whispers. The Gorge of Forgotten Things. Down in the deep shadows of the Great Plains lies a place where everything lost eventually finds a home. From rusted keys to forgotten promises. The Wheelers and their faithful Barley are about to descend into a world built from memories. But be careful. In the gorge, the things we leave behind have a way of calling us back. Take a deep breath. Let's follow the Wander-Wagon into the silence. The Gorge of Forgotten Things. Part 1. The Fall into Yesterday. The golden hour had arrived, painting the world in hues of honey and amber. High above the valley floor, the Wander-Wagon rolled smoothly along a breathtaking mountain switchback. It was the kind of evening that felt like a living postcard. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with peace. Dad Arthur kept a relaxed grip on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the winding asphalt, while Mom Ellie rested her head against the passenger window, watching the long shadows of the pines stretch across the road. In the back, Max and Lily were unusually quiet, and even Barley, their faithful golden retriever, was fast asleep, curled into a soft, snoring ball on the seat. A light, melodic tune played from the dashboard speakers, a song from years ago that seemed to invite the spirit of the past into the van. "Do you remember, Max?" Arthur said with a soft chuckle. "Your very first haircut? You were so convinced the barber was going to steal your ears that you hid under the chair for 20 minutes. Max grinned, leaning forward. "I remember the lollipop I got after. It was shaped like a dinosaur. I thought it was the best thing in the world." "And what about my first tooth?" Lily added, her eyes bright with the memory. "I lost it in a giant bowl of popcorn, and we spent the whole movie searching for it with flashlights." The family laughed, the sound echoing warmly in the small space. But as the sun dipped lower, touching the edge of the horizon, the conversation shifted. The light-hearted quips grew into deeper, more cherished stories. They spoke of the day Arthur and Ellie were married under the old oak tree, the air smelling of rain and jasmine. They spoke of the quiet, magical nights when the children were born, and the world seemed to stand still, just for them. "And Sonny," Ellie whispered, her voice tinged with a sweet sadness. "Our first pup. He used to wait by the door every single evening, his tail thumping against the wood like a drum." As they drifted further into the sea of memories, the world outside began to change. The sharp edges of the mountains grew soft and blurry. The rhythmic hum of the tires on the pavement faded into a strange, muffled silence. A thick, woolly pink mist began to rise from the valley, swirling around the Wander-Wagon like a dream taking shape. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt magnetic, as if the very air was pulling them toward the edge of the road. Ellie looked down at her living map and gasped. The glowing blue lines of the highway had vanished. In their place was nothing but blank, ancient parchment shimmering with a faint, pearly light. "Arthur," she started to say, but Arthur was already lost in his own mind, describing the way the light had hit the lake on their first family camping trip. For just one heartbeat, his eyes left the road, drawn away by the vivid image of the past. In that split second, the Wander-Wagon didn't turn. It drifted. It caught a hidden current of pure nostalgia and slid gracefully over the cliff's edge. There was no terrifying jolt, no screeching of brakes, and no crash. Instead, the van sank into the thick, fuzzy mist as if it were falling through a mountain of cotton candy. Whoosh! Shh! The world turned completely pink and soft. After a long, weightless moment, the van came to a gentle, bouncy halt. The family sat in stunned silence as the mist cleared. They weren't in a canyon of rock. They were resting atop a giant, sprawling mountain made of thousands of old woolen sweaters, frayed scarves, and forgotten blankets. They had arrived in the dimension of the disappeared. The Gorge of Forgotten Things. Part 2. The Fang Cutter and the Woolen Sea. The family stepped out of the Wander-Wagon, their boots sinking softly into the mountain of sweaters. The silence here was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It felt muffled, as if the air itself was made of velvet. As the pink mist thinned, the true scale of the dimension of the disappeared revealed itself. The canyon walls weren't made of stone. They were staggering towers of ancient, mismatched suitcases and rusted trunks stacked high into the hazy sky. To their left, a forest of broken umbrellas grew from the fabric ground, their jagged ribs pointing toward the stars like skeletal trees. Below them, a slow-moving river flowed, but instead of water, it was a shimmering stream of millions of faded black and white photographs drifting lazily through the valley. Everywhere they looked, the ground was sanded with lost buttons of every shape and color, and tangled piles of iron keys that had long ago lost their locks. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, picking up a stray pearl button. "But it's so quiet." Mom Ellie checked her living map again, which was now pulsing with a rhythmic, heartbeat-like glow. "Our nostalgia did this," she realized, her voice filled with awe. "Our stories weren't just words. They were an emotional magnet. We called out to the past so loudly that the past finally answered. We've been pulled into the place where everything truly forgotten ends up." Dad Arthur nodded, though his mechanic's brain was already focusing on the way out. "We need to keep moving. If we stay too long, we might become a memory ourselves." He climbed back into the driver's seat and steered the van onto a flat path that looked like a road, though it was actually a long, shimmering trail of discarded movie tickets and yellowed postcards. But as the tires began to roll, a sickening crunch snap echoed through the canyon. The van lurched and came to a dead stop. Arthur slammed his foot on the gas. Vroom! The engine roared, but the wheels only spun in place. He jumped out to check the damage and let out a frustrated groan. A massive, sticky cluster of old fishing lines, tangled kite strings, and unraveling cassette tapes had snared the rear axle. It was a nightmare of nylon and plastic. Every time the wheels turned, the lines tightened like a boa constrictor, biting deep into the rubber tires. "I can't cut through this," Arthur shouted, hacking at a thick cord with his heavy-duty camping knife. Scritch! The blade didn't even leave a mark. The ancient fishing line was unnaturally strong, reinforced by the magic of the dimension. Within minutes, his blade was dull, and the family felt a cold wave of panic. They were stuck in the heart of the woolen sea. That was when Barley stepped forward. The golden retriever had been watching with his head tilted, sensing his family's rising fear. He trotted over to the tangled wheel, his tail low, and pressed his wet nose directly against the thickest, most stubborn knot of fishing line. Suddenly, Barley's leather collar began to pulse. A soft, golden light radiated from the buckle, washing over his fur. Barley took a deep, shaky breath, his chest expanding, and then, achoo! The first sneeze sent a flurry of golden dust into the air. Achoo! The second sneeze made the ground vibrate. Achoo! On the third and loudest sneeze, a brilliant burst of golden sparks erupted from his mouth. As the sparks hit the ground, they swirled together, hardening into a solid, heavy object. Arthur reached down and picked it up. It was the fang cutter. The tool had rugged handles made of weathered staghorn, but its blades were two curved, serrated metal fangs that glowed with an intense, cherry-red heat. Arthur pressed the glowing fangs against the tangled mess. Sssss! With a sharp hiss and a puff of white smoke, the indestructible fishing line snapped instantly. The heat from the fangs didn't just cut, it vaporized the plastic on contact. Within seconds, the wheels were free. "Good boy, Barley," Arthur whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "The dog just gave us the ultimate key." The Gorge of Forgotten Things, Part 3. The Eye of the Needle and the Road of Tomorrow. A heavy, absolute stillness had settled over the Gorge of Forgotten Things. There was no wind, no sound, and the pink mist stood frozen like cotton candy in the air. Mom Ellie sat in the passenger seat, looking at her living map. The blue navigation lines were long gone, replaced by a terrifying, shifting void that showed nothing but empty, pearly parchment. Dad Arthur kept his hands clamped on the steering wheel, slowly guiding the Wander-Wagon along a narrow rut, weaving between endless, staggering mountains of forgotten suitcases, rusted iron keys, and mountains of mismatched shoes. It felt like they were driving through a mausoleum of yesterdays. The silence was beginning to suffocate them. To break the tension, Max suddenly spoke up from the back seat, his voice clear and resonant in the quiet cabin. "Hey, do you guys remember my old red bike? The one with the broken bell? I tried to race Sunny and crashed right into the rose bush." The memory hung in the air for just 1 second before a flash of brilliant color erupted from the dusty roadside. Right there, wedged between a rusted oil drum and a pile of old license plates, was a spark of glossy red. It wasn't a spectral image. It was the actual red bicycle. It was perfectly real, covered in dust, with the exact same deep scratch on the handlebars from that fateful encounter with the rosebush. The family sat frozen as Arthur braked. Max leaned forward, his eyes wide. Barley stood up, a quiet whimper escaping his throat. Mom Ellie gasped, a sudden look of realization washing over her face. "Arthur, stop! Max, did you see that?" She turned to the rest of the family, her face illuminated by a sudden wave of hope. "It didn't appear randomly. The gorge isn't just storing forgotten things. It's reacting to our memories. We aren't just driving on a random path. We are driving on the path of our own history. To get out, we have to remember our way back, step by step, all the way to this very morning." Dad Arthur nodded, a mechanic's determination in his eyes. He put the van back into gear. Now they were driving with purpose. They began to chronologically reconstruct the chain of events that had led them here. The rule was simple. Whatever they remembered, the gorge revealed. If the memory showed the object on the left, Arthur turned left. If it was on the right, he turned right. They were building their own road home. "Sunny," Ellie murmured, her voice soft with the memory of their first dog. "He used to wait by the door, and his first leather collar had that tiny brass bell." Arthur steered the van toward a towering, precariously stacked mountain of luggage. There, resting on the very peak, was a real leather collar with a small brass bell. Arthur slowed to a stop. Lily clambered out, her sneakers crunching softly on lost photographs. She reached up and took the collar. It was warm to the touch and smelled faintly of home. She placed it carefully into her pocket. Barley gave a sudden, joyous bark, and the faint golden glow of his own collar seemed to indicate the next sharp turn to the left. The further they remembered, the closer they got to the now. Within minutes, they were approaching that very morning, before the crash. "This morning," Lily recalled, "before we left the campground, you and Dad sang that song about the biggest, sweetest apple pie in the world." The air suddenly smelled of cinnamon and sugar. Perched right on an old, moss-covered tree stump on the roadside was a single, woven basket filled to the brim with perfect, ripe, cinnamon-scented apples. The Wheelers laughed, a purely joyous sound that seemed to push the heavy silence away. They were almost there. When they reached the memory of the actual crash on the switchback, the pink mist suddenly turned thick and sticky, trying to slow the van down. "This is the most important part," Ellie announced, her voice filled with a powerful, philosophical certainty. "We cannot stay here, lost in our yesterday. To break free, we have to stop remembering what was and start dreaming of what will be." Arthur took a deep breath. His voice boomed in the small cabin as he looked forward, past the fog. Tomorrow, we are going to drive straight to that town on the banks of the river. We are going to bake that apple pie, and it's going to be glorious." From these words, the frozen pink fog began to glow, not from above, but from within. The energy of their future plans was pure white, hot, and impossible to contain. It pierced through the heavy layers of the gorge. The mountains of suitcases and old keys crumbled and fell away as a brilliant, blindingly white, radiant, eye-of-the-needle portal formed directly in the sky above the road. It wasn't just a gate. It was a literal, pulsing pathway stitching the dimension of memory to the reality of the present. "Hold on!" Arthur shouted. The things of their past chronological journey now lined the road, forming a shimmering, perfect corridor of yesterday. Arthur gave the van full gas. Room! Driven by the energy of their future plans, the Wander-Wagon became a silver rocket. It shot down the trail of memories, bypassing a lifetime of lost things, and flew straight into the radiant, pulsing center of the eye of the needle. There was a final, tremendous snap of stitched space, a brief moment of absolute weightlessness, and then absolute silence. A fresh, crisp smell of pine and mountain air replaced the woolly dust. The air was cool and clear. They were sitting in the exact same spot on the mountain switchback, the honey-colored golden hour sunset still painting the peaks. Cyclacads chirped outside. They were home. The family sat for a long time, just breathing. Max looked down at the dashboard. There, nestled right next to the navigator, was a single, simple, scratched brass button from his childhood jacket. Barley gave a soft, happy sneeze. This time, it was just a regular sneeze. He laid his head on Max's knee. Ellie reached out and touched Arthur's hand. The echoes of the canyon are fading now. It's comforting to know, isn't it, that nothing is ever truly lost as long as someone carries the memory of it in their heart. The Wheelers found more than just old trinkets today. They found the stories that connect us all. But for now, the gorge is quiet once more. The book closes for today. The end of this tale is just the beginning of our next journey. See you in the next adventure. This was Elias. Sleep tight, and may your dreams find the way home.